In Salem at this point of the year, very pleasant climate, and I wish all of you a very good morning and thank Dr. Loganathan to have permit me to chair this session. And the topic now is hepatic venous outflow obstructions. I think it is a well-known entity, but then we depend a lot on the radiologist and the radiological interventionist to help us out in the management of this disease. And we have Dr. Shyam Kumar, Professor of Radiology Department of Radiology, Christian Medical College, Belgium, to talk on this. I request Dr. Shyam to take over and conduct the proceedings.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction.
Chairpersons for the next session, hematology and GI liver. What is the link? Dr. Sudhandri Kannan.
I want to personally thank Dr. Loganathan for giving me the opportunity. It's not a new home, it is already a previous home for me for the last 3 years. So it's very nice to be back in the serene and nice atmosphere in the Salem. And the talk also is very valid because I saw 2 cases in hematology and liver link-up. These were both extremely rare cases and all these things were published. So I don't understand between you and Dr. Sudhandri Kannan, please.
Thanks, Chairperson and Dr. Loganathan and the organizers for inviting for this lecture. In fact, there are not few, there are a number of instances where there is the hematology and GI symptoms will look alike, and it may be sometimes difficult to differentiate. Published more than 800 cases of pancreatic thrombosis, in which they have found that myeloproliferation to be a cause in at least 50% of the cases. And as you know, myeloproliferation, myeloproliferative disorders are very common in the elderly, and now we know that the etiological basis, the mutation has been JAK2 mutated. So this is polycythemia is most lethal in terms of thrombotic tendencies, and you must remember that if you can avoid a major thrombotic event, the long-term prognosis is very good. They rarely transform, and sometimes if the patient may go on for even 2 decades or 3 decades just with antithrombotic medications without having any other problems. And essential thrombocythemia is the most common and least problematic of all the myeloproliferative diseases. This also, the only problem with this disease is either bleeding or thrombosis. And myelofibrosis, if you diagnose them in the pre-fibrotic stage, they also have a good long-term survival, except for the risk of thrombosis. And if they have an established myelofibrosis, then the problems are different. And just like imagining you have for the BCR-ABL Philadelphia chromosome, you have JAK2 inhibitors also, but the inhibition is not that specific like for this tyrosine kinase inhibitor, which is for a Philadelphia chromosome. So it will not completely eliminate the disease, but it will relieve the symptoms to the greatest level. So I will tell you a few examples of patients who present with the myeloproliferative disease. This is a 60-year-old male who was admitted elsewhere with severe abdominal pain and was found to have a splenic infarction. He had a splenectomy. But so he said this patient only had a mild thrombocytosis, which you will easily miss and you will think is a reactive phenomena. And this patient had a splenectomy and went home. And he presented to our hospital later, probably after a month, with stroke, and he had a gross echo-aortic thrombosis also, and he had a thrombocytosis of more than 10 lakhs at that time. So the management is simple. Ideally this patient should be diagnosed even before a thrombotic event, but if they had a thrombotic event, initiation of anticoagulation immediately perioperative and perioperative reduction of the white cell count, and then management of initiation of anticoagulation immediately after surgery is the key. This is a young lady had left hypochondrial pain, and you heard a lot about this Bhattacharya recently. And this lady in fact, was diagnosed in Chennai and came to us with a massive ascites requiring this thing, tapping, and she was lost for follow-up. And why I'm telling is, within a matter of weeks, the Budd-Chiari can, this polycythemia, if not properly managed, it can produce devastating changes. This another 45-year-old male just had splenomegaly, mild leukocytosis, anorexia, recurrent abdominal pain, and it was treated as suspected TB by the physician there. And incidentally, because the symptoms were increasing, he had a further angio which showed narrowing of superior mesenteric artery. He underwent stenting, but only had transient improvement and had rethrombosis. He need to have a vessel graft, so we referred him to CMC Vellore. He had a permanent relief now, and he's on long term because he had a multiple thrombosis and recurring thrombosis. We advised him lifelong aspirin and warfarin. These are the pictures he had initially. So this is a 70-year-old lady. This lady is from an affluent family, and she only had loss of appetite, weight loss, and back pain. She has gone to various hospitals, and as you know, the DD will be enormous until she had a CT abdomen, which showed a thrombosis, and a battery of investigation had already been done. When we looked at the investigation, she had a thrombocytosis of 8 lakhs. 8 lakhs is not high, but we confirmed that she had essential thrombocytosis. JAK2 was positive, and the bone marrow was confirmatory. She had a splenic infarct, as you can see, and there was an infarct in the kidneys also, and she had aortic thrombus. So splenic infarct of the kidneys, and she got a thrombus in the aorta with multiple thrombosis in the splanchnic arteries as well. So once after we did not had platelet lowering agents initially, we just put her on anticoagulation, but subsequent visits we found that her platelet had risen to 18 lakhs. So that's why sometimes when you see a patient for the first time, the platelet count may be just above the normal because of the recent thrombosis. So we see only 20% of the myeloproliferative diseases before they get a major thrombotic event. We get most of the patient from GI and or from cardiology and from the neurology department. So if the main reason to diagnose them is to avoid these complications before they occur. And the diagnostic workup, as I said, now it's made simple by the JAK2 mutation, and even some of the ET, if they don't have a diagnostic workup, if they have the JAK2 mutation, you do have to do a bone marrow to confirm the diagnosis. But if you are always in doubt whether it's a reactive or this thing, just start aspirin and then wait for the workup to be done. Even if the workup takes another 1 month or so, the patient may be on aspirin. That will help in avoiding a major event. So you can just start aspirin and say all is well, because if they had a major event, then it is a catastrophic for them. The next important problem is gastrointestinal lymphomas. The high-grade lymphomas are very rapidly progressive, and they may come with a massive ascites also. And you don't hesitate to do a LDH, because LDH is a marker of lymphoid proliferation as well as for red cell proliferation. So LDH will be very high in the fastest growing tumors. Burkitt's is very common in young adults, and the prompt diagnosis is important because you have to have a cure rate of more than 90%. And even a delay, like this patient had an abdominal lymphadenopathy. This was happened in Western countries. You know that during Christmas holidays, the whole hospital shuts off, and his diagnosis was just delayed by a week, and he was promptly treated on hyper-CVAD and including intrathecal. But when he came for the second cycle, he had the cranial palsy. So he had this shows that he had a large load of cells going into the brain even before starting the therapy. Even the intrathecal was not sufficient to get rid of the blast cells which had entered to the CNS. This another patient who was admitted with a huge ascites, And ascitic fluid showed a high LDH, and the patient within 2 days the creatinine rose to 2.3, which means he's got a high tumor lysis, and ultrasound was normal. It did not show anything other than that, but ascitic fluid only showed abnormal lymphoid cell with the suggestion of lymphoma. The gastroenterologist asked me whether bone marrow could help a diagnosis. I said bone marrow may be involved and may not be involved, so we have to go for a flow cytometry of the ascitic fluid, which promptly gave the diagnosis. It was all CD10 and 20 positive, and when you had a lambda restriction, it confirms a monoclonality. So you can easily differentiate between a polyclonal and the monoclonal cells. And this patient, because of the high creatinine, we can't do a CT, but with the dialysis, we started on simple steroids and cyclophosphamide, and with the raspicurase, his symptoms subsided, and after a week, his CT showed multiple masses in the chest and retroperitoneum, which was not obvious initially. This is another lady who had a refractory ascites as pleural effusion. In fact, she was admitted in 2 big hospitals, having recurring repeated taps, and everybody knew that she had a probable malignancy, but initial CT-guided mediastinal biopsy was done. It was a failure, and gastroscopy-guided transduodenal biopsy was also a failure, because you know that sampling for a lymphoma, you need a good architecture to have a diagnosis. But you know, the thing is, we did a flow cytometry on the pleural fluid, which showed a morphology and features suggestive of a follicular lymphoma. We started our job, and within 10 days, all the fluids disappeared. We did the biopsy after 10 days, and it confirmed the follicular lymphoma. And this is also true in pediatric cases, where sometimes patients present with extensive abdominal masses, and we tell the pediatric surgeons, instead of opening laparotomy, we give us some ascitic fluid. Sometimes you get a diagnosis, you may not have to do a major surgery in those patients. And isolated splenomegaly is another problem. And if you rule out all hepatological causes, I would say that in majority of the cases, if it's a hematological problem, a diagnosis can be made on a very careful examination of the smear, and sometimes you have to have a bone marrow, because it will have implications on the future management. Sometimes you may have to avoid a splenectomy. Sometimes you will have a good medical management for a case where you need not have to have a splenectomy. Sometimes splenectomy may be dangerous. So that is why